That's great, Joe. Here it is, Joe Tansen, one of the great guitarists of all time, I might say so myself. He was born with a guitar in his hand.
How you doing,
I'm quite sure. Joe, good to see you, mate.
Yeah, good to see you too.
Yeah. Well, you come up in a really exciting era, Chicago and the blues.
In the 1960s.
1960s, yeah. That's when it all happened for music in America. That was the birth of everything. Elvis launched it along.
It started rock and roll.
Yes.
Well, it helped rock and roll. A lot. The blues started rock and roll. That's where it came from.
So the blues actually started in your era.
Well, it was sung by sharecroppers back in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, going back to artists and guitar players like Robert Johnson from the 1920s. Guys like Charlie Patton, one of the first guys, Howlin' Wolf, Muddy Waters. They were all guys who lived in the Delta, and they were all poor, and they were all cotton pickers, sharecroppers, whatever. And that music, eventually, as progress was made, they invented machines that picked the cotton. They didn't need these guys anymore. So they were out of a job. They had nothing to do. So this was during, the Industrial Revolution, and Chicago was a boom town. And that was the closest to the Mississippi Delta. They'd migrate up through Memphis. A lot of them stayed in Memphis. B.B. King had his own radio show there in the 1940s and 50s. Howlin' Wolf, and then a lot of them moved on to the big city, which was Chicago. And Chicago was a melting pot of everything. I mean, there was a lot of work available. All the pinball machines and all the gambling machines that were in Las Vegas were made in Chicago. So these guys could find work. They came there, and they found work plentiful, and they would play in a part of town called Maxwell Street, which is a whole story about. It's kind of like the Beale Street of Chicago. It's got a lot of music, historical of value to it, because this music, which was electric blues, was born there. So these guys came with their acoustic guitars just like this, and they used to sit and play the guitar at the end of the day after picking cotton, sit on the front porch and play a song, and they'd sing for a few hours and go to bed. They couldn't be heard. Soon, drummers were playing drums, and then the electric bass was already invented. I think 1952 by Leo Fender, and so now you got bass and drums to compete with an acoustic guitar, and this would not do it. So they got electric guitars, and that's where the sound of the electric blues was born. It's like the movie The Blues Brothers. That was all shot down on Maxwell Street.
So, what drove you to Chicago?
Well, I was born there.
Oh, really?
I was born there, and my dad was a music lover. Loved rock and roll, loved Fats Domino. Who else? Ray Charles. He was a big fan of Ray Charles and B.B. King. Black music. And he was a truck driver. I mean, so if anybody should have been a racist, it would have been him. But he loved black music. And when I took up music, he started to think, well, I'm going to be a truck driver my whole life. I don't have any talent to do anything else but drive a truck. Maybe my son will make a name for the family, and maybe he'll do this for real, which I did. And this place called Maxwell Street, it was magical. It was a bunch of Jewish European immigrants. And the Jews have been persecuted forever, and the blacks were also persecuted in America. So the Jews and the blacks all merged together on Maxwell Street. The Jews had shops, They sold merchandise, and there was never a conflict between the two. And all the black guys would come down there, and in the wintertime, when it was too cold, they would have all these big garbage cans, and they would throw logs in them and light them on fire. And they'd be all huddled around the trash can playing. And my dad would take me there, and I was like 10 years old. I was just looking at this, fascinated, thinking, this is amazing. And of course, you could buy anything down there. It was a big swap meet. Blocks and blocks and blocks. And you could park your car there. About three blocks down, 4 blocks down, because it really got busy on the weekends. And you could be looking around and going, boy, those hubcaps look familiar. And you realize those are the hubcaps on your car that somebody just stole, and they're trying to sell them back to you. It was a great place. And then they had the best hot dog stand in the world called Jimmy's. It's still there. It's like 120 years old or something, or 100 years old. And he'd have these onions, and he'd cook them, and there was a mountain of them in this kind of truck. And he'd have a fan, and he'd blow all the smoke from the onions down the street. So from blocks away, you could see him, and you're getting hungry, and the line would be a mile long. Pork chop sandwiches, bone in. I don't know how he expected anybody to eat a pork chop sandwich with the bone in. So I did it once and almost broke my tooth. But they were good. And the best hot dogs you've ever had in what we call Chicago Italian beef. No place else does it like that. And I'd go down on Saturday morning. We'd get up at 6 in the morning because we lived in the suburbs, about a 45-minute drive. We'd get down there, and I'd smell the hot dogs. I'd hear the guys playing music, and we'd spend the whole day there. And we'd look through all the crap on the street, and you never knew what you could find there. There were a lot of gems then. You know, these days we have the internet and we have eBay, so everybody knows what everything is worth today. You're never going to find, I don't know, an old Gibson Les Paul anymore, you know, that's worth $250,000 out on a swap meet. But back then, you could.
Wow.
So,
what was the treasure you found there?
well, I never got lucky to find any really cool old Gibson and Fender amplifiers or guitars, which is what I'd always looked for. But what I did get down there, we wore these leather jackets called cabrettas. It was cabretta leather, made in Italy. And they were little, like a car coat length, and a certain look, kind of Edwardian type of lapel. The cool guys wore those, and you can buy them down on Maxwell Street. There was a store called Smoky Joe's, and all the black guys who were dressed really cool, they'd have alligator boots. They'd have what we called iridescent pants. They were like sharkskin pants, and they would be lime green, and they'd glow in the dark, and jackets that matched, and fedoras and pork pie hats. You'd walk into Smoky Joe's, and these clothes would be all over the place, and I'd just be like, oh man, this is cool. I want a jacket. So I got a couple of cabrettas there. I talked my dad into buying me one, and he wasn't going to get me snakeskin boots. The line was drawn there, but I got a cabretta once. And it was cool.
So when did you start doing gigs where you got actually paid for your music?
Well, at that time, when my dad was taking me to Maxwell Street, I was still 12, 13 years old. I think I was about 18 or 19 when I'd form bands that actually would get paid to play someplace, wherever we could. We'd play at the local VFW hall. We'd play anywhere. They'd play for a senior citizen party if they'd have us. But really, when I got to be 21 and I could get into the bars in Chicago, because they had, on the north side, there was the north side and the south side. And the north side was all white college kids. Those white college kids could go see Muddy Waters at a small little nightclub. And he eventually became a friend of mine. I got to know him really well. He drank scotch and soda. You buy him a scotch and soda, he was your best friend. And sometimes I'd sit in and play music with him. And, he is like the father of the blues. I mean, knowing him is as cool as knowing all four Beatles, probably cooler. And the white college kids would get a chance to see all these guys. Muddy, Howlin' Wolf, Otis Spann, Coco Taylor, all the famous blues people. They all lived there. And the South Side, on the other hand, was dangerous. That's where they all lived, the black people. That was their home. And they would play in bars on the South Side, and they would tote razor knives and stuff, and you look at the girl the wrong way, and someone got cut up and all slashed up. So we could not go there, but we used to sneak down there, and I remember once going on the South Side because they got really wild. They'd play for a white audience of college kids, and they couldn't do certain things. You know, it was very sexual, too. And they would get drunk and crazy in their own environment, and that's where you really wanted to see them get loose and, you know, play real blues. And it was good enough to go see them with a bunch of college kids, but, you know, we'd sneak sometimes, and we'd drive down to the South Side, get down in the car, right below the dashboard, sometimes lay on the floor and open the window so we could hear the music pouring out the window. But we never got a chance to peek in. But there were guys before me that had enough nerve to actually walk into those bars and do it, and they never bothered them. One was a very famous guy named Paul Butterfield, who formed a group called the Paul Butterfield Blues Band. A famous guitar player named Mike Bloomfield, who ended up playing with Bob Dylan, all from Chicago, and he died, I believe, of heroin overdose about 50 years ago. But he's a legend. And these guys had balls, and they were tough. Mm-hmm. They looked cool, and they'd walk right into the bar, and they'd invite them up to play. They go, "You come in here, you must have some balls. You can play." But I was too chicken shit. I'd lay down in the car and listen through the window.
Yeah. Did you have some scary moments when you were a young kid going into this really wild sort of environment?
Me and my friends, you know, we had long hair then, and, you know, it was the late 60s, early 70s, 71, 72. The black guys didn't bother us because they see guys with long hair. They think, they're musicians. They're okay. Leave them alone. And we always figured they'd leave us alone anyway because we had long hair and we were musicians. And we'd go into their part of town, into the record stores, because you could buy the greatest blues records there. Stuff you couldn't get in my neighborhood. You know, it's this white suburbs. And they didn't have these records there. There they had everything. I mean, artists I'd never heard of and songs like Big Long Black Snake. They ain't going to be selling that stuff at the local Walgreens in my neighborhood. And that's what I liked about it. So, scary moments. The most frightening was not getting paid at the end of the night when you played a bar. I happened to have a guy in the band whose brother was one of the toughest guys in Cook County Jail. and I mean, this guy carried an Uzi back in the 70s. So his name was Mike Britton, and his brother was Laddie, who had his name tattooed on his you-know-what, on his penis. Showed me one time, you know. He comes over to my house when my parents were on vacation, whips it out. It says Laddie. I said, who tattoos their name on their dick? But anyway, his brother was Mike Britton, and Mike was a really good singer. White guy who sang like Ray Charles. So, come on in. You're in the band. So him and I would sing. And at the end of the night, when the guy who owned the bar, the club owner, said, "Fuck you, I ain't paying you." Okay, Mike. So Mike would go in the back and have a little chat with him. Him and the bar owner would come out, and Mike's counting all the money and gives us all of our money. And the bar owner just, "Hey, see you guys." So that was one of the benefits of having something a strong arm in your band. And those were the scariest times, you know, when you think, oh, there's going to be a fight. Oh, one very scary moment, and I'm jumping ahead 20, 30 years. I eventually joined the band Badfinger. famous group. We're doing a tour, and we're in the darkest part of the bayou in Louisiana, Cajun country. Dangerous, could be dangerous. We're in a biker bar, Hell's Angels. One night we would be in the most beautiful arena, 3,000 seat Fox Theater, and the next night we're playing for bikers in a swamp somewhere. The guy who booked this tour was a real idiot. So one night we're in there and we're going, this is kind of frightening here. And we're playing rock and roll music all night. Just the kind of stuff bikers loved, and they liked us. And the club owner liked us. And we were traveling in a big giant van, a tour bus. And the tour bus is parked outside, and we're sitting in the tour bus. And afterwards, some guy wanted to interview us in the bus. So he does his interview, and he leaves. The owner comes out and says to me, I like you guys, and you did a really good show tonight. And he said, if I didn't like you, you'd all be dead right now. He said, because there were 4 guys inside who were going to come in here and cut all your throats and take the money. Very next day, I got on a plane and came back home to California. I never played live music. Wasn't professionally again until about 30 years later, 20 years later.
So what did you do all the time in between that, those 30 years?
Played in Chicago, got real popular, and then one day woke up and went, you know what, I can't take this any further here. Chicago was not a record town. It wasn't like New York or Los Angeles. All the record companies were here. You wanted to be a real serious artist, you got to go where the big boys play, and I knew I had to get out of there. England at the time, too, early 70s. And that's where I wanted to go. Wanted to go to London.
Now, did you meet the Beatles at some point?
No. Never had an opportunity to do that. I was at Ringo's house one day, as close as I got. One of the guys in my band played cards with Ringo.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, anyway, one guy I know played cards with Ringo, and something about the Liverpudlians, they're well-known cheapskates. Joey was a guitar player, Joey Mullen, and he was from Liverpool. They all grew up together, them and the Beatles. And he's playing cards with Ringo, and he owed Ringo owed him $20. And Ringo was a well-known cheapskate, from what I understand. One day we're on our way to rehearsals, and Joey says, I got to make a stop someplace. So we're going over the hill from the Valley to Beverly Hills, which was where our management was. We had a meeting with him. He goes, well, we'll stop someplace first. I think it was Sunswept Plaza Drive. We get at the top, pull up this long driveway, and we're waiting out in the car for 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And the guy who was driving us, our driver, was Pete Wiggins, a guy named Pete Wiggins. I said to Pete, what's this all about? And he's smiling. He said, never mind. Joey will be out in a few minutes. So all of a sudden I see Joey coming out the door, and I'm looking at the guy. I'm going, that's Ringo. He says, Ringo of the Beatles. And Joey gets in the car. He says, yeah, he owed me $20. He went there to collect his $20 from a billionaire. And then we drove to rehearsal. So it was my only opportunity to meet a Beatle. And, I wish he would have introduced me, but he didn't. And in between, Colin, at one point, I played bars in Chicago for a good 5, 6, 7 years. And you had to play top 40 music then, whatever was on the radio, to get a job in a nightclub where you'd actually got paid for it. Or you played in these sleazy bars that had strippers in them, and blues clubs who didn't care what you played. And I said, that's for me. I'm going to go play there because I don't have to play this stupid top 40 music. These guys will let me play whatever I wanted. And it wasn't top 40. You could play your own songs. You could play classic blues standards, jazz standards, whatever you wanted to do. So I did that for 5, 6, 7 years, and then all of a sudden, I meet up with a guy who plays drums. He said, I know this guy in California. His name's Arthur Spivak. And Arthur ended up managing Prince and Tori Amos and another guy named Mark, his name escapes, Mark Cohen, who had a Grammy-winning record called Walking in Memphis back 20, 30 years ago. Anyway, Kenny was sending him music that I had written on cassettes. And one day the phone rings and Arthur says, I'd like to bring you guys to California. I said, well, I'll put you up in an apartment building, I'll get you a record deal and give you a little money to keep you alive. Jumped at it. You know, it took 6 months to get the contract signed, and that's what brought me to California.
And what was California like then in terms of music production?
It was great back in the mid-'70s. I think I got here in '76. It was like, it wasn't any more expensive to live here than Chicago. It was cheap. You can get an apartment for $200 a month, a junk-ass car for $300-400. You didn't have to have insurance. It was like a cowboy town. And music was everywhere. I mean, it was really a great moment for California. There was a couple of great moments. One was the mid-'60s when you had all the bands like the Byrds, Joni Mitchell, the Buffalo Springfield, the Doors. It was an explosion here, all in Laurel Canyon. They all lived in Crosby, Stills, and Nash, which started there at Joni's house. And then later on, the next big explosion was Fleetwood Mac and the Eagles and Jackson Browne and groups like that. And I love the stuff. I'd listen to it and I go, Linda Ronstadt. I love this stuff. And it changed the way I looked at music a lot. It had a big influence on me. The California sound of the 70s, mid-'70s. Anything was possible. You got record deals, $500,000, $1 million, a $2 million record deal. That doesn't exist anymore. Record company give you $1 million to make 2 records. They don't do that today. You're lucky you get $20,000 out of them.
So what has happened to the music industry then?
Well, the internet. The internet changed everything, Colin. People give music away for free. So, you know, of course, all the record stores closed. I can't remember when. You know, Tower Records was the last of them. Nobody was buying records anymore. Those huge budgets to make albums, they all went away. Record companies said, we're not paying that anymore. Rap music came along. It was cheap. You make a record in your living room for $50, you know, go steal a few things and go to Guitar Center, buy yourself a cheap computer and a keyboard and a microphone, and now you're in the living room making a rap record, and they're selling 10 million copies of stuff like this. So it changed everything. It's just, well, we're not giving you $1 million anymore to go in a studio to make a record. We bring these guys in, and we'll make a ton of money, and we don't have to invest anything.
So what was the next stage after that for music? After rap music, what was the next step?
Well, we're still in that period.
Which is what? How would you describe it? How would you describe this period of music that we are in?
Well, I think the music is terrible. Nobody knows how to write a song anymore, lyrically or melodically. People, I think it was just a consciousness of the time, of the 1960s and the 1970s. Good lyrics, a song that really meant something and spoke to people, whether it was politically or, you know, about subjects we were all affected or concerned about, relationships, breakups, you know, whatever. Stuff with profound lyric. And, you know, quite often it was political of the times. You know, today it's not about that. It's about bitches and hoes and you know that. I don't. I still don't understand why the females accept it, because it's very anti.
It's degrading.
Woman.
It's degrading to them, isn't it?
It's
Really?
yeah, it's degrading. It's very feminist music, and most of the time, but the women don't seem to have a problem with it at all.
Yeah.
They're more obsessed these days over hating Donald Trump than being called a bitch or a hoe by their boyfriend, which
Yeah.
I don't get. I mean, their boyfriends have said worse things about women than Donald Trump has, but yet they'd rather hate him.
Well, what do you think of the future of music? Where's it going?
I think there's always going to be people who don't want what the masses are buying. They know that there's something better out there. I think a lot of young people have went back and discovered music from my generation. Love the Rolling Stones, Led Zeppelin, David Bowie, Bob Dylan, because their generation is doing nothing like that, and they know. I know this because I got kids that are, in their late 20s, but they grew up in a house where they were exposed to all of this, to classic rock and roll. They call it classic rock and roll now. And even before then, I mean, my daughter's, one of her favorite singers in the world is Billie Holiday. Billie Holiday is, 1940s.
Wow.
And I think as long as there's young people out there that want to know what came before 2010 or 2000, what happened back in the 60s and the 50s and the 70s and the 80s, and they go back and they listen to that stuff, there are going to be young artists who will be influenced by that. And therefore, good music will always stay alive through them. They may not represent the masses, and maybe they're just a small little segment of people that play that kind of music, but they'll always be out there. And, who knows? Who knows what's going to happen in 20 or 30 years?
I sometimes wonder when I think about the changing in music and really the decline of what is popular music, what we used to think was popular, and I wonder sometimes if it's got to do with dancing doesn't much exist anymore. Like remember they had big dance halls and you went to great dances and great bands were employed at these big halls, but there's no dance halls anymore. There's no place to dance anymore. That's gone away.
Yeah, it's sad because it used to be so much fun to play to an audience like that. I mean, we did sock hops when I was a teenager in high school. And the thing that I loved about it most is because, once you're standing up there and you got a guitar in your hand and you're a young guy and you start singing, forget about it. You can get any girl in the damn room. And it was wonderful. And I recognized this right away. I thought, well, that's a real good benefit here. But they'd be out there dancing and having a blast to listening to your music, and it kind of made you a better performer too, because you can gauge the audience, playing a fast song, you really get them excited, and then you play something nice and slow, they start slow dancing, and you go, I can control these people by what I do here. And I don't know why it went away, Colin. It just doesn't seem like it was a wonderful thing. I mean, even up through the Woodstock era, people take their clothes off and start dancing. They don't do that anymore. I wish they did.
Yeah, it's got very the young generation has got very modest, so to speak. They're not outlandish like we used to be. We used to be crazy, but they're not. So I guess they're getting kicks someplace, maybe on the internet, maybe some other ways of expressing themselves today that we didn't have then, of course.
Well,
we
they
didn't.
have these things called raves, but that's a whole different kind of music. They call it electronic dance music, and it's really kind of started in Europe, like Berlin, Sweden, very big on it. I don't like it at all. It's all robotic stuff, but they go to these things. Sometimes they'll last 2 or 3 days, and they'll take ecstasy, the drug of the day, and they'll just get crazy for 2 or 3 days in a row. That's where dancing still exists.
But you were brought up in a world and developed in a world where drugs and alcohol and all kind of deviant behavior was omnipresent. So how did you escape it, or did you?
I experienced enough to meet my needs, so to speak. But I was also smart enough to watch a lot of my friends who made an absolute mess of their life by overindulging and not taking care of themselves. I loved music, and I always felt, and that pressure was around all the time. I mean, when I was in Badfingers, we not only played music together, but we would hang out together at times. We were all at a get-together at somebody's house, and there's Coke all over the table, and people say, "Oh, God, nah, no, thank you." I didn't want to be one of those rock and roll tragedies, and I remember saying to the late Tommy Evans. Tom was the bass player in Badfinger, who Paul McCartney chose to sing the song "Come and Get It." Y'all remember that, I think. Yeah. If you want it, here it is. Come and get it. You better hurry, 'cause you're mine. Can't even remember the words. But Tommy sang that song. It was written by Paul McCartney, and that was Badfinger's first #1 hit. I remember one day, we used to get together and have our meetings in the bowling alley at Jerry's Deli on Coldwater. And the English guys in the band refused to smoke American cigarettes. They'd smoke these things, Rothmans, I think was one of them. And there was a smoke shop across the street, and it's still there. I remember passing it a couple of weeks ago, and this all came back to me. I remember one sunny afternoon, we're having, they liked to play bowling. They were into bowling. They had their own fucking bowling balls and their initials on the ball, and I thought it was so cheesy. But I would go down there, and there was a little bar in the bowling alley where we had our band meetings. And Tommy was out of cigarettes, so he said, "Do you want to walk with me across the street and get some cigarettes?" Okay. Dangerous getting across the street. So we're in the middle, in the medium part of the street, while cars are flying by in either way, looking for a break to try to cut across the street, get his cigarettes. And he starts kind of tearing up. And I said, "What's the matter?" And he said, I envy you. He said, you don't go along with the crowd. And he just said, "You're not, I can't help but doing it. I do whatever people expect of me." I said, "Well, that's fucking stupid." I said, "Just do what you want to do. Don't be forced into doing anything." He was like the Keith Moon of the group. The guy that everybody expected to drive the Rolls Royce into a swimming pool and do something stupid so they'd all get a laugh out of it. And I said, "You should stop being everybody's clown." I said, it's a hard thing to do. I said, one day you're going to wind up in a bad situation because of that. And he ended up killing himself. But, he was jealous of me because I didn't, succumb to the peer pressure and do the things that everybody else did. And I remember saying to him, I said, "You don't need to take drugs or be an alcoholic. You don't have to be Jim Morrison and drink a quart of whiskey to go and write a good song." I said, "I'd rather do that sober." And, he so much wanted to be that way, but he couldn't. It was too late. He had already he had already established himself as what he was, and he couldn't be me, and I couldn't be him.
Talking about being you, is there anything that you wish you had done differently?
Yes.
What?
Quit that band.
Really?
It's too long of a story to get into it right now, but at one point it was Christmas, and we were just finishing up at Capitol Records, we're at Capitol Tower, mixing the Airwaves album, which was an album I did with them. And at that point, we had a 40-piece orchestra, and they're doing all the overdubs, and we're getting to the end of making that record. And I had a lot of differences of opinion with these guys. A lot of it due to what we were just talking about.
Wow.
You know, there was a lot of money involved at one point, and I didn't know where any of it was going. And that was, I was an equal member, and thinking, I go over to one of the guys' houses, and there's all brand new furniture in there. And I go, geez, he didn't have this a couple of days ago. Or there's a Jaguar in the driveway. And things like that. And then I remember there was a little Chinese restaurant just a few blocks down from Capitol where we would all go. They would go for drinks, Mai Tais. And so we'd like to meet you over at the Chinese restaurant in about a half hour. They knew I was really unhappy with being in the band. So I went. Joey and Tommy got so drunk, cornered me in the booth, both put their arms around me. We really want you to be involved in this and to stay. We know you're not happy. And I remember after it all ended and I listened to them, heard them out, they walked back up the hill to Capitol. I sat there for 15 minutes thinking, what should I do? Because I was really unhappy. Got as far as the parking lot, I had a little MGB convertible, top down. It was December, it was cold, but I didn't care. It was a convertible, and I was young and cool. The top was never up on that car. I pointed it towards the Hollywood freeway and never looked back. Many years later, then Tony Kaye joined the band after I left. He was the piano player in a very famous group called Yes. Many years later, I had a conversation with Joey, 25 years later, and I said, I regret that. I wish I wouldn't have done it. I wish I would have stuck it out and fought with you guys to try to change your attitudes towards things. It's because the music was it was so good. At the end of the day, it was probably worth the aggravation, but at the time, I didn't think so.
Interesting. So, Joe, what do you think about, you say that people today have lost the art of writing music? Well, how does that happen? How do people forget how to write songs? Writing songs seems to be the oldest thing man has done since the beginning of time. Come out of the cave and he wrote a song about it.
I don't know. I can't figure that out. It's almost like lyrics or profound lyrics aren't important to them. Music is just a beat, something to shake your ass to, and it doesn't really mean anything. I think all the best songwriters, the singer-songwriter era was the 70s for sure. Carole King, James Taylor, Neil Young, Joni Mitchell, Bob Dylan. People were, Jackson Browne, people were writing incredible songs. Some of the best songs ever written came from that era. People were very, the 60s and the 70s were real turbulent times. You had the civil rights movement in the 60s, and, there was a lot of angst. The Kent State shootings of those kids, and which Neil Young wrote a very heartfelt song about.
Well, it's not like we're short of drama today in the world. We have we're on the verge of World War III by the looks of it. If you look at it one way, it's the start of World War III. If you look at it in another, we're very close. But we have Putin's claiming the world, and he's advancing, and America is kind of not much stepping in. So it seems to me America's standing back. China's pulling a lot of cards right now, and Putin is. And what are we doing? We don't seem to be chastising anybody. We don't seem to be drawing the line. We don't seem to be saying, wait a minute, this is not on. The American weapons are ending up being used by Russia against Ukraine, and Ukraine's, it's a mess.
As far as songwriting is concerned, there are plenty of things to get up in arms about today.
But they're not being written.
No, they're not being written, and it's just because I think a lot of people are just so complacent about it. They're so caught up in their everyday life and going to get their nails done, or a guy wanting to go play fucking golf someplace that doesn't pay attention. I mean, even some of my own family members are guilty about this. They have no idea. Like the Chinese have bought into Hollywood. And a lot of people don't even know that. I mean, they found a way to change the way people think and the power of a motion picture. So they have literally been financing films in Hollywood. And now, if you want to get money for a movie, you deal with them and you do what they want, and they'll look at your script and your movie idea and go, yeah, I think this character could be a Chinese person. So, and the director, I'm not really, I don't think so. You want to get your movie made? The main character is going to be Chinese, and they will. Well, they've used their power and their influence and their money to suggest certain things that to get us to accept them. Because I mean, their goal is world domination. Anybody who knows anything about anything will tell you that they want to take over the world, and
that's fairly evident. What should America be doing to stop this?
Well, I don't think Hollywood should be doing business with them anymore instead of kissing their ass. They should just say, and one director, I watched a whole documentary on Epoch TV about this, and I forget the director's name, but he was taking a lot of money from Hollywood. He was doing all the things that they asked him to do. He would change the script, to suit them. And if they got what they wanted, they'd give you money. And in the beginning, his wife was looking at him all this time, questioning what he was doing. And at one point, she said to him, I think what you're doing is wrong. And he said, no, this is good. It's beneficial to both of us. And, I'm trying to bring, America to see China in a different way. And she said, it's one of the countries that has the worst human rights violations in the world. Say something against the Chinese Communist Party, and you disappear over there. I said, that's somebody we shouldn't be doing business with. And he thought about this, woke up the next day and said, you know what, you're right. Now, at the risk of getting his films done, he doesn't care if they say, he won't go to them for money anymore, just do business in America, because he believes this is really bad for us. Because they're buying up houses everywhere in California, buying up businesses pretty soon. And I said this a couple of weeks ago at a barbecue here. And everybody that was here was family, friends of family. Matter of fact, I think you were here too, Colin.
Yes.
If I'm not mistaken. I said, this continues you're all going to be speaking Chinese in a couple of years. And somebody who was sitting at the table said, "What's wrong with that?" A younger person. And I just looked up at him and I thought, really? What's wrong with that? You have no idea who you're dealing with and what you're talking about here. I said, you don't want to be speaking Chinese.
Do you think Russia is a bigger danger
Russia?
than China?
I think they're both equally as dangerous, Colin.
Well, Putin's got very big weapons. Well, so do we, and so do the Chinese.
So do the Chinese, yeah.
So it's going to be. It's a bit of a. Reminds me of a bunch of gunslingers standing in a room, and everybody's got guns.
That's the Mexican standoff.
Mexican standoff.
We got a major Mexican standoff. I think Putin probably at the end of the day would be more dangerous than China, and I'll tell you why. Because he's the guy. The Chinese Communist Party consists of I think Putin is probably more of a scary guy because in China they have a whole bunch of guys, that make the decisions. There's really not just one guy. And Putin's always been trying to show what a tough guy he is. We've all just recently, since this whole thing with the Ukraine, recently seen what he's capable of. But I'd be afraid of both of them. And times are scary now. I mean, we went through that in the '60s, during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Yes. With Kennedy, and we were all I was a little kid then, school kid, but not realizing what could have happened. Kennedy telling telling them to take the missiles out of Cuba, and if they had 24 hours or 48 hours to take them out, or to get them out of there, or it was going to be World War III.
Yeah.
And we came very close to that 50, 60 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And
but there's a lot more arms in the world now.
Yes.
A tremendous number of arms. That was very, very, very small compared with what's available today. If Russia launched at us, we'd launch at them. China would get in the act, and between the three of us, there'd be enough nuclear power to take off the planet.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's what we're looking at. It's not going to be as much as a World
All
War.
it just takes is one nut job to say, I don't fucking care.
Yeah.
Everybody's afraid of death. Everybody's afraid of dying. And I think that's the one thing that keeps anybody from pushing a button. Mm-hmm. Putin's got to be thinking, does he really want to go down with the ship? I don't think anybody does. Well, I shouldn't say that. Hitler didn't care.
No, he didn't.
And there eventually, hopefully not. This won't happen ever. But there could be somebody somewhere that just goes, I don't give a shit. I'm pressing the button.
Well, the present situation does mirror the situation that existed with Hitler. When Hitler started to rise up through the ranks in Germany, everybody thought he was a joke. Nobody paid any attention to him. Chamberlain looked at him, and he went and had meetings with him, and they all thought he was all okay. He was just a union guy trying to make a better living for everybody. That's what they thought. But he just kept going, and nobody stopped him, and until he was well on his way. But that took a world coalition to get together to stop him, and that was World War II. But I wonder who's stepping in the way of Putin now? Who's coming? The parallels between what Putin is doing and what Germany did are very similar. And the stark similarity is the West is just sitting on their hands. So what they do to Putin, we slap him with a few meaningless sanctions, and that's it.
Well, it's like the Americans didn't get involved in World War II until the very end,
Correct.
and they realized by then, hey, this is some serious shit. I mean, Hitler was working on a nuclear weapon, and the first one he was going to point it at was America, and it was a race, really. We raced with Oppenheimer to beat him.
Yeah.
And we got the bomb first.
Yeah.
And but people were having good lives in America. They didn't want another war, and they didn't want to hear about what was happening over there. A little bit of it was leaking over here as to, there was some bad shit going on over there, but people didn't want to know about it. Roosevelt said, we don't want a war right now. We're not interested. And then they finally just couldn't. When the cat was out of the bag, so to speak, we couldn't turn our back on it anymore.
Yeah.
And that's when America got involved in the war over there. Thank God we did.
Well, we could be approaching a time where America needs to get involved again on that level. Although the amount of weapons that are around today it's a bit scary.
In my opinion, we don't have a strong president. He's China's bitch, and not mincing any words. And China knows that. They control him, and I don't think he's strong enough to make America a threat or an opposition to anybody. So I think everybody just says, as long as they stay the way they are, we can do whatever we want to do. When America is safe, the world is safe when there's a strong man in the White House. You get somebody strong there, and they know.
So you feel that Trump will make the difference?
What?
You think Trump will make the difference?
Definitely. I don't think, I think people are going to go other countries that, like the countries in question right now, will see him and go, we're not going to mess with this guy because he's capable of reacting. Where I don't think the guy we have right now is, and he's proved that.
Yeah.
I mean, like you said, what has he done about anything?
Nothing has been done. And
I mean, he's letting people opened our borders to the drug cartel.
Yeah.
I mean, they're pouring in here. This is great. And then we got the idiot that we have for governor right now telling everybody in Mexico that they can come over here and get free health care.
Extraordinary. Amazing. Well, it's extraordinary. It's amazing that we're in this time of America's in peril, really. If you look at it any way you want to look at it, this is more challenges than we've had in the last 60 years, probably certainly since Hitler, but there was a world order got against Hitler, and now we don't have a world order going against the Putin. We don't have it against China. There's no coalition.
It's all this woke thinking, Colin. It's bad for America. It's bad for our country. I just heard recently something about a couple of weeks ago. Sly Stallone made an announcement. He said he backed out of a multi-million-dollar film deal that he was supposed to do with Robert De Niro. And he said, I don't work with woke people. Sly went up to the top of my list of greatest guys in the world. Sly for president. When I heard that, I thought, yeah. We need more people standing up and saying, this is bullshit. This is ridiculous. This cancel culture bullshit. I can't speak my mind without the fear of somebody deleting me or canceling me from Facebook or some other social media format. I don't give a fuck. Take me off Facebook. You can have that shit. I'm not going to think this way. It's wrong. You should be able to speak freely because that's what people died for in every war we've ever had. Freedom. You know, do you want to be censored? Do you want censorship? Do you want to be told what you can say, who you vote for? Freedom of speech. It's been around for a long time, and a lot of people have died for it. And it's slowly being taken away. I think that this whole woke-minded ridiculousness that we're dealing with in America today is responsible for a lot of the bad things that are happening to the country.
Yeah,
I think America needs to be taken back, and these people taught a lesson. You say, this is what a republic is about. This is what a democracy is about. Don't worry about who gets offended. You know, just say whatever you need to say. You know, there's always the remote control, Colin. If you don't like what somebody is saying, change the channel.
Yeah, right.
It's that simple. I don't like him. I don't like what he's saying. I'm going to ban him. No, just walk away and go, he's an asshole. I don't agree with him. And that's the way America's been for forever.
Yeah.
And it works real well.
Yeah. Well, I think you're right about that. We've lost freedom of speech because you're not really free to say what you want. You got to be careful of it because you know the government mightn't censor you, but people who support the government that you might want to do business with, they will privately censor you. So there's a lot of that going on.
Yeah.
So people, yes, but I think I have a great hope that Americans are. They're still the people who defeated Hitler in World War II, and they're still the people who defeated the Japanese as well. They're still fighters. They just haven't been tapped on the shoulder yet. But it's about time they were tapped on the shoulder and say, look, heads up, we got a dangerous situation.
Well, I think there are a lot of people, young and older, who are doing that right now. It'll be really interesting in the next election.
It certainly will be, and it's going to be. Yeah, I agree. There is a very strong person who has the great potential to save us from this because they will fear him, and it's best to have an enemy that fears you.
A lot of people disagree with me on this, but I actually, and I wasn't a fan of Donald Trump. You know, I think he's an arrogant guy, but at the end of the day, he's a better choice than what we've had. You have to look at America over the last 4 years and see what's happened to it. And you go, do we want 4 more years of this? No way. It was a lot better when Trump was president, but they won't leave the guy alone. Just people have such a strong hatred towards him. They just can't just go, you know what? Give him a fucking chance to do his job.
Yeah.
Let him do his job because that's what's going to be good for the country instead of trying to throw him in jail or, you know, for other presidents who have done far worse things than what they're trying to accuse him of.
Well, I got a suggestion. You should write a song that will stir the hearts of people and get them moving in the right direction.
Well, I already did.
Tell us.
And I'll sing it the next time for you. It's called The Rivers Run Dry.
All right.
Don't drink from the well. If the water tastes bad, you don't drink from the well. That's the opening line. If the devil comes calling and he's got something to sell, he knows your name, he'll even look you in the eye. Temperature is rising and the rivers run dry.
Thank you, Joe Tansen, and we're going to listen to that song, that's for sure. Next time up.
Yeah, I'll play it for you next time.
Thank you, Joe.
All right, Colin.
Okay, mate.